Thank you very much for coming. This is Rick Harnish. I am the Executive Director of the High Speed Rail Alliance. We are a nonprofit based out of Chicago. We strive to be the most knowledgeable independent source of what high-speed rail is, why we need to build it, and what steps local leaders can take in order to help make it happen. We educate folks around the country about those things, and we provide people like you and local leaders the tools they need in order to educate their leaders in state capitals like Sacramento or in Washington, D.C. We believe in what we call the integrated network approach, where varieties of trains operating on different types of infrastructure work together to connect entire regions, not just major city pairs, but through links with different types of trains and buses, linking both very big cities and small towns together. We're very excited that California has been a leader in all of this, both shared use, regional, and high-speed rail. And they are the first to have put together a truly integrated plan for 2040, where high-speed rail will be the backbone of a tremendous public transit network that will connect the entire state with fast, frequent, and dependable trains. Again, the backbone of that is California high-speed rail, the first high-speed line under construction in the United States. So we're very excited to have Brian Annis, the Chief Financial Officer of the authority, to give us an update on where it's at, where it's going, and what steps are next. So thank you very much for joining us today, Brian, and I'll let you take it away.
Great. Well, thank you, Rick. I'm happy to be here. It is in my view, a new dawn for high-speed rail in North America, and I think high-speed rail in California certainly got an early start, and we're making some significant progress. And what I was going to do today is walk through about a 12-page PowerPoint that gives an update on where the project is in California. And I thought I might end with some comments on the funding side of it, because obviously we've just now entered into various notice of funding availability cycles, or NOFO cycles, with the federal government as part of the bipartisan infrastructure law. So, you know, we have a lot of wind coming our way to be at our backs as we proceed forward due to the work of the federal government, and see them as a significant funding partner again. And they were for us about a decade ago, and that really got us started in California. Why don't we go to the next slide, and I'll just update everyone if you're not familiar with our California project, where we are. The authority itself is an entity in state government. We have a mission to initiate construction of high-speed rail train system that utilizes an alignment and technology capable of sustained speeds of 200 miles or greater per hour. And so that is our mission. We're governed by a public board for transparency, and the public's welcome to come to our board meetings. We're also part of the State Transportation Agency, which is led by a cabinet secretary, our director, or our secretary of transportation. It's again in the governor's cabinet. So in that sense, that gets to some of the points Rick talked about in being part of the transportation agency that helps us ensure that our system is well integrated with regional trains, local transit, etc. And those are programs very much that are supported by our agency level. So there's a map here on your screen. This is our complete high-speed rail system. It does hit all of our major population centers in the state of California. We had a Bond Act pass in 2008 that establishes a phase 1 and phase 2 of our system. Phase 1 is on the blue line on the map, about 494 miles, running from San Francisco to Los Angeles and then to Anaheim. We have a phase 2 for our full build out that would extend the system another 300 miles in the north, linking from Merced to Sacramento, and then in the south from Los Angeles to San Bernardino and then south to San Diego. Again, this overall system would have up to 24 stations and have the capacity in key sections to travel over 200 miles per hour. Next slide. So I'm happy to report that we're making significant progress, especially in the last couple years. Wanted to start on the environmental side. This is something folks may not realize, but we are now, as of April of 2022, we have environmentally cleared a segment from the San Francisco Bay Area all the way to Los Angeles County. So that's from San Jose in the Bay Area to Palmdale in the south, which is in the northern part of LA County. So again, the environmental clearance in the last 2 years especially has gone from about 119 miles in the between Madera and a point north of Bakersfield to really be a 380 mile segment between San Jose and Palmdale. So, you know, environmental clearance is very significant because that does clear the way for construction. And we'll talk more about how we're viewing that as we go forward. But we have now 380 miles cleared. At our August board meeting in a couple months, we expect our board to approve the San Francisco to San Jose segment. So with that one, we'll have cleared all the way from San Francisco to Palmdale. And those final two segments, Palmdale to Burbank and Los Angeles to Anaheim segments, we expect those to be environmentally cleared in the next 2 years in 23 and 24. Next slide. So, you know, the status of environmental being largely cleared with, you know, remaining segments close to clearance really means we're thinking of the project more in terms of what the three major segments, and you know, we are able to advance and are advancing infrastructure investments in all three of these segments. And I'm going to go through each of the three segments just to let you know what we're doing in each. Our main segment for investment right now is the Central Valley of California, and that's the yellow line on the map from Merced to Bakersfield, 171 mile segment. It is 100% environmentally cleared, and we have 119 miles of the 171 miles currently under construction. In that 119 miles, we have 93 major structures and 119 guideway miles. Most of the structures, actually 65 of 93 major structures, are either completed or under active construction. And then for guideway miles, we also have about 2/3 of those guideway miles either fully completed or under construction. These are the civil construction work that's ongoing. Once we clear the full 119 miles, a separate contract will come in to lay track and electrified systems on top of that. For the expansion of current construction, you'll note here we've got about 52 miles that we would expand both together north and south, going from Madera to Merced and north of Bakersfield into downtown Bakersfield. With that work, we're in procurement right now to advance the design beyond the environmental stage to a configuration status of design where we'd know exactly the right-of-way we need to acquire and the utilities we need to move, and would start discussing some of those utility relocations and other work with our local partners at a more detailed level. So when we do start construction, we'll be in good shape. The track and systems contract is currently in procurement. That may result in a contract in place by the end of the calendar year. And then we anticipate going out for train set procurement in 2023. The goal is to initiate operations between Merced and Bakersfield by 2030. One thing I might mention with California's Central Valley, the state really is of course, the largest population in the country, but I thought as we go through these sections, I might just give you population numbers so you appreciate that each section is bigger than the average state in terms of population. So our Central Valley of California has about 6 million people in it, which is, I think, bigger than about 30 states in population. So, each of these three regions is a average state size or better of a population. So certainly populations that can support high-speed rail. Next slide, please. So this is a depiction of some of our Central Valley stations. Another contract that's currently being procured is to design the 4 Central Valley stations that high-speed rail is responsible for. There's a 5th Central Valley station that we're doing cooperatively with the San Joaquin Joint Powers Authority that runs the current Amtrak service. So they'll be responsible for the Madera station, and high-speed rail is going through the design stage for these other 4 stations, which starting on the top left is the Merced station. Going down to bottom left is the depiction of the downtown Fresno station. Top right is the Hanford or Kings Tulare station, which is between Fresno and Bakersfield. And lastly, the bottom right is the downtown Bakersfield station. One thing I'll mention here as we're looking at the stations is we think an important aspect of doing high-speed rail right is to get to the downtown areas. So you'll note here we're in downtown Merced, downtown Fresno, and downtown Bakersfield. So it does cost more initially to get to the downtown stations, but of course that's where you tend to find your urban transit hubs. So by doing this, we're better able to connect with regional buses, statewide. We'll be connecting with electrified urban rail at BART in the Bay Area and other connections at LA Union Station, which I'll get to in a minute as well. Next slide. So the next segment I wanted to focus a bit on was the Bay Area segment. From San Francisco to Merced in the Central Valley. This segment is 159 miles. To compare to what Central Valley mileage, that was 171. So each of these 3 segments is about equivalent in mileage, about a third of our total phase 1 system. As I mentioned, by our August board meeting, we expect to clear the San Francisco to San Jose segment. And with that, we will have 100% environmentally cleared the Bay Area segment of high-speed rail. With that, we're excited about being able to further advance design in 22-23. And as described in the Central Valley, that's what gets us to a configuration state of design. So we know the exact right-of-way we need, and also have identified the utilities and other third-party issues that allow us to get to a good construction start when funding is identified to complete this section. One thing that's very significant, though, to mention on this segment is there's a 50-mile or 51-mile part between San Francisco and San Jose that's currently served by the commuter train service Caltrain. And Caltrain on their own wanted to electrify their system. And with high-speed rail money, they were able to accelerate that electrification of the Caltrain corridor. And that's going to be a shared corridor. So the exciting thing about this is when that project finishes in 2024, we're going to have a 51-mile segment already high-speed rail compatible in terms of electrification. And when high-speed rail comes in, we'll do some modifications to stations and maintenance facilities, et cetera. But really having that 51-mile electrified section is hugely beneficial for high-speed rail when we're there, but short-term, Caltrain, the commuter rail, is going to go all electric between that segment, and ultimately they run some run some diesel trains between San Jose and Gilroy, but we also hope to collectively make that a shared corridor. And so when we electrify that corridor, Caltrain will be fully electric. And of course, California High-Speed Rail is fully electric as well. Why don't we go to the next slide, please? So Southern California, this is the third of 3 of our phase 1 corridors, 164 miles in total. We have cleared already 92 miles environmentally, about 56%. And again, those final 2 segments should be cleared in 23 and 24. We hope to start advancing design beginning in as early as 2023, again, to further ready these segments for a good construction start through the right-of-way and the utility and third-party work. The segment is unfunded, but as a whole, but we have been making early investments in this corridor. Chief among those is work at Los Angeles Union Station. If any of you have used that station, it's a stub station, so trains enter and exit from the north. But this project would make it a run-through station, building a viaduct over Highway 101 south of the station. So again, trains could run north-south and south-north through the station without having a one-way entrance and exit. And that greatly increases the capacity of the station, reduces pollution, and really makes with the capacity benefit, makes it ready to see high-speed rail trains and the growth that'll come in the future from high-speed rail and also increased regional service. The next slide. In the Central Valley, we do track closely our construction jobs. The Central Valley is one of the most disadvantaged areas of the state, lower income compared to the rest of the state. So these jobs are really moving the needle in the Central Valley. We count total construction jobs created over the construction phase of the project in the Central Valley. It's been 7,800 deployed workers on these construction sites over the years. And on the average week, we're deploying about 1,000 construction workers to currently what's about 34 active construction sites. Small business, current total is about 698 small businesses working on the project. About 224 are disadvantaged business enterprises and 79 are disabled veteran business enterprises. Our project is, of course, electrified high-speed rail, but one thing our board has directed is that we only purchase electricity that's produced with zero emissions itself. So we're zero emission in operation, but also the electricity we produce or we purchase will be zero emissions in production. In our construction, we're also very conscious about greenhouse gas and pollution. So we have required all of our contractors to use Tier 4 construction equipment. That's the lower emission equipment. And when our phase 1 system's running, we estimate we'll take the equivalent of about 400,000 cars off the road, which has a very dramatic effect over time, not only on greenhouse gas reductions, but also on safety in terms of reduced death rates from that are correlated with cars and vehicle miles traveled. So again, the high-speed rail is very significant in many areas, not just mobility. Next slide. So what you're seeing here is a 3-minute video that I'll talk over a bit. This is our San Joaquin River Viaduct, which is I call it a 2-arch structure. Each side of that structure is an arch, and it's the northern gateway to Fresno if you're traveling on Highway 99. So this is north of Fresno, and we convert here to what I think of as the southern gateway to Fresno on Highway 99, a 4-arch structure. It's the Cedar Viaduct. And so as people pass through Fresno today, entering and exiting, you'll see these two, what I think are iconic high-speed rail structures. And, within a decade here, we will see those trains swishing by those structures. A couple other structures to highlight here, just to give you a sense of both the construction project and the type of infrastructure we're building. This is of course, road bridge over a high-speed rail. where you could see the freight tracks to the side of it. And there was a wall in the middle you might have seen, which was our intrusion protection barrier to keep any derailed freight trains from entering the high-speed rail track area. This is another structure here where high-speed rail will run next to freight tracks. Again, where the two are close, we have a intrusion protection barrier that will get built ultimately for safety. This is one of the first. I think we're going to show two viaducts in this presentation, and these are massive structures. If you're able to visit one, you'll get a real sense of scale from these. These are where high-speed rail is passing over an existing freight line, moving from one side of the freight track to the other. So these are massive structures where we build a crossover. Here we're seeing a high-speed rail crossing above a roadway. So we of course have several of these, and if you look at the background, you can see the guideway continuing well beyond that structure. Here's a Wasco viaduct, a town in the southern part of our 119 miles, another crossing of high-speed rail over a freight track. Again, this one gives you a better sense of what these are. We become elevated above grade and then finally cross over the freight rail track. Here is a road crossing where high-speed rail is not adjacent to a freight track. And you can see cars on that one, which give you the sense that many of our structures are completed. Again, these are all major structures, and many are now being completed and put into beneficial use in the community. So that concludes the 3-minute video. I have a few more slides and then happy to take questions. And this one, we're happy to report the results of a recent poll. The UC Berkeley Institute of Governmental Studies did a recent poll of California voters asking their support of high-speed rail, and we're thrilled to see that it's on the increase. 5-3 margin is supporting the project right now. 56% indicated support, 35% not support. It varies a bit by area of the state. Again, highest in the San Francisco Bay Area. But again, generally, we're seeing strong support around the state of California, where we're looking at our future riders or our youngest voters. They are the most enthusiastic. 65% of voters 18 to 40 are supporting the project. And also, we see a lot of support in lower income households here. 63% of those making less than $20,000 support the project's progress. Next slide. This one just to indicate a little bit of a breakdown by gender and ethnic group. 70% of Black voters, 63% of Latino voters favoring continued work on the project. And you see here the male and female breakout being fairly similar, both in the mid-50s for that. Next slide. Well, that completes what the construction update part. I'm just going to mention, I think, Rick, you'd asked that we talk a little bit about the funding stuff, and just mentioned we're very excited about the bipartisan infrastructure law. While there's not a high-speed rail specific title in that program, it was crafted to have many programs with high-speed rail eligibility. And we just on Monday ourselves here applied for the combined DOT program that included the so-called mega project pot of money. So California applied for about $1.3 billion, thinking we might have a multi-year approach by the federal government. And with that tranche of money, we're hoping to definitively plan for an initial 2-track railroad on our Central Valley segment. We think operationally a 1-track railroad would provide the service we're looking for, but it's probably most efficient to build that 2 tracks from the start. So we're asking the federal government to help fund the 2 tracks, and also significantly the initial train set procurement. We think, building 220-mile-per-hour train sets in the United States would be a very big win, and we're hopeful they're able to fund that as well through this grant. We look to the Fed-State Partnership program in the future, the other funding programs such as infra, the CRISI program, the RAISE program, others to help advance the program over time as well. But we're excited about it. The governor sent a very good support letter, Governor Newsom, with our grant application on Monday, citing the very significant financial contribution California has already made. Our voters supported a $9 billion bond in 2008, and our legislature supported a direction of about 25% of a unique program we have here in California called Cap and Trade. It's an auction program for reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So there's a carbon allowance that emitters have to purchase, and that produces a revenue stream, and those revenues are used to further reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So with that, California high-speed rail is receiving about 25% of those funds, which through 2030, we think will be about 11 billion. So really with the bonds, with the cap and trade money, California is in for about 20 billion already. The federal government during the Obama administration put in about 3.5 billion. So we're right now running about 83% state, about 17% federal. We think that's a good entry point for these new grant applications, and asking that, for those, the federal government catch up a bit on a funding contribution for this true national scale project. And we're hoping to end the grant cycle here in the next 4 or 5 years with up to 8 billion of federal funds that would still have California in the primary funding seat with about 65%, but would raise the federal share to about 35%. And again, we feel with the state's contribution, we're well set up for that. I'll conclude my remarks there and hand it back to Rick. Happy to answer any questions you have.
Yeah, thank you very much. That was very helpful. You remind me that the initial interstate system was built with 90% federal money. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't complain about seeing that program for high-speed rail across the country, but
absolutely,
I don't think we're going to get there. So, there's a standard question that I always get, and I think I have a very good answer for, but I will ask you, why start in the Central Valley?
Sure. Well, it's a great question, and a couple of things I'd say. And one is, again, the Central Valley by itself is larger than most states in the United States. So I don't want to have any of you leave with the impression there's no population in the Central Valley. But the other advantages of starting there are that provides a stretch where we'll be operating at full high speeds. So that is the segment where we'll be operating at full 220 miles per hour. So that allows us to start there, have that major speed benefit, be able to test trains at that full speed. In the Bay Area and in the Southern California regions, will generally be in shared corridors. We will not be operating at the full 220 miles per hour. We'll be running often at 110 miles per hour with the quad gates and other safety features that you invest in to get to those speeds. But the Central Valley is a place that, again, had the benefit of being able to, with the first segment invested in, show full high-speed rail operation. It's also one of the highest pollution regions in California. So the pollution benefit going there first is a good thing to alleviate some of the pollution issues there. It's also one of our economically disadvantaged areas. So it's also a benefit in construction and operation. And really, when we connect the Central Valley to the coast, what that really provides is that economic connectivity that the Central Valley needs. It is difficult by car or by plane often to travel from the Central Valley to the Southern California and Bay areas. So when we make those coastal connections, there'll be I think a great economic uptick in the Central Valley as they're able to connect more as suburban type communities to the central economic engines of California, of the Bay Area and California, and of course allows those coastal regions to connect to the agricultural community, an engine that is the Central Valley, and really the skilled population that's there.
So yeah, I had been told over and over again, there's nobody that lives in the Central Valley. And there was a day that in order to see the sites, the construction sites, I drove from Sacramento to LA, split it over 2 days. And I was surprised at how much traffic there is on 99, which was kind of frightening, and how big those cities are that you're stopping in. But also I was very disappointed because I was looking forward to seeing the mountains as I drove south through the valley on what should have been a beautiful sunny day, but you couldn't see it through the pollution. So
yeah,
it's really an issue. So, but another thing that people don't understand very well is how the connections will work. So will the connecting services like the San Joaquins at the north end, the buses at the south end, the buses in between, how will those benefit from having high-speed trains operating?
Yeah, we do see it as a system, and currently we have the Amtrak San Joaquin service running in the Central Valley, which I believe has 7 round trips per day, but many of the ends you end up connecting to a bus, and of course running on the shared freight line, that's very much capacity constrained in terms of frequency. It's constrained in terms of speed, but that's a service that will continue to the north of Merced, and really to have the best benefit from our initial high-speed rail investment, we need to connect seamlessly with them. Additionally, there's a commuter service called Altamont Commuter Express that runs currently between Stockton and San Jose in the Bay Area, and they are planning to provide additional service that would connect in Merced and up to Sacramento. So really, with high-speed rail between Merced and Bakersfield on the north side, we see increasingly robust connections with the Amtrak San Joaquins and the ACE trains that really creates that robust Bay Area, Sacramento Valley connection. And our modeling shows that the ridership across that Central Valley systems would more than double with the high-speed rail. So it's high-speed rail. The speed is about 100 minutes faster for a nonstop between Bakersfield and Merced, that 171 miles. But then additionally, to provide the connectivity and the increased frequency that will come with high-speed rail, those services are investing to add trains. And again, that whole system, I believe, would if memory serves, would go in ridership from about 4 million today in the Central Valley to about 8.8 million riders a year with that initial high-speed rail segment.
And so with that extra ridership, you get the ability to run more frequent service, which drives more ridership because frequency is so critical, right?
Right.
And so what does that connection look like at Merced? Is it like an airport where you have to go from one end of a big terminal to the other end to connect to a flight?
No, well, that it's there's a lot of energy right now for that Merced station, because there was one of the pictures I showed earlier did have the Merced station, but making sure that the connections all at the same place is very key. Clearly, we want our folks to be able just to walk across the platform or go down an escalator as they're making that connection, because you need that seamless connection really to have the full benefits of the ridership. So yeah, our Merced station that's being looked at, we still need to clear it environmentally, but I think the concept that's most often looked at is high-speed rail will come in at a viaduct near the Union Pacific line, which is on the western freight rail segment of downtown Merced. ACE train will come in from the north, also along the UP corridor. And then for the Amtrak service, it currently uses the BNSF corridor. So there's about a mile connection that'll be built for the Amtrak train coming south on BNSF to transition over to next to the UP alignment in Merced. So yeah, how the picture looked that I shared a while back, you see high-speed rail coming in a viaduct, and you see a grade tracks that would come in for the San Joaquins and the ACE. And again, you're looking at an escalator ride up or down. So, that convenience that we see in other systems. I think of, for those of you that might have ridden BART in the Bay Area, some of those stations where, depending on where you're transferring or which train and your next destination, it might be a cross-platform transfer, it might be an escalator ride down to a platform, and again, very, very easy, seamless transfer.
Okay, so kind of the worst case, it would be BART to Richmond, or to Amtrak in Richmond, right?
There you go, the Richmond station, Amtrak BART connection. There you go.
That's a pretty good one.
That's a good one.
So this isn't just about trains in the Central Valley in the first phase. This is about connecting to the rest of the existing system and boosting the rest of the system.
Right. And again, I probably should have mentioned with our Amtrak service running north of Merced, it splits. Some of the trains go into Sacramento. Some of the trains go into Oakland. There's easy connections to San Francisco. The ACE train, as I said, goes into San Jose. There's connections being built there for easy connection to the Caltrain electrified system, BART, et cetera. So Northern California is very well connected, and as longer term look south. Right now we Amtrak riders in Bakersfield do transfer to a bus connection to get to Los Angeles. With high-speed rail, you'll now have that rail connection to Southern California, and LA Union Station, of course, is the biggest rail hub in Southern California, where you have Amtrak, you have the Metrolink commuter service, and you have LA light rail, LA Metro service buses, and of course high-speed rail when we arrive there.
Excellent. And then it seems like, so the most challenging parts, but the most transformative parts are the crossings of Pacheco Pass and Tehachapi Pass. You had mentioned in your presentation your hopes to start the next round of design in 2023. What does that look like, and how do you get to actually starting construction on this?
Right. Well, the design advancement will allow us to do a couple things. We're to further design. We'll look at right of way, we'll look at utilities, we'll look at various third-party issues. But on the tunneling portions, we'll look at some of the geotechnical analysis. We'll try to understand the geology of those sections better, so that we can better anticipate what the boring of those tunnels will take, what the speeds will be, what the conditions encountered will be, so that the tunnel analysis will be able to proceed as well as we advance design in the next stage. Yeah, I look forward to the day when the tunnel boring machines arrive and you start to see some of that grinding underway. And the geography of California, the mountains have really stopped efficient rail for really forever. If anyone's ridden our current Coast Starlight service, which is the interstate Amtrak service that runs up the western coast, that's one train per day going north, one train per day going south. It runs along the coastal subdivision there, and it takes about 11 hours to get from Southern California to the Bay Area. And, you contrast that to high-speed rail going from Southern to Northern California in about 3 hours. And getting you right into the downtown areas, there's really no comparison. And, certainly that compares well even to the airplane trips due to the airport issues and rental cars and all those other steps you need if you're going downtown to downtown. So yeah, high-speed rail will break through those I should say mountain range barriers that have, kind of slowed rail transportation, since the 1850s in California.
Yeah, California and Spain are much alike. And I remember my first trip to ride high-speed trains. One of those trips was Madrid to Cordoba.
Hmm.
And going south at, high speed across the plain and not knowing the geography and looking at these mountains and going, how are we going to get around these mountains? And suddenly realizing, no, we're going to go through those mountains. And if Spain can do it, right, 30 years ago, we should be able to do it here in the States. So those would be tremendously valuable. And let's figure out how to get the legislature to say yes to doing those tunnels, right? So Chris, are there any, it looks like there are a lot of questions, but can you manage the process of getting those out?
I will do my best. I'm Chris Oth, the Deputy Director here with the High Speed Rail Alliance, and I've kept an eye on the questions coming in. We have a lot of them. I don't think that we'll be able to get to them all, but let's do as many as we can. First off, someone asked, will the slides be shared? I'm not sure about sharing the actual slides, but I wanted to let everyone know that we'll have a recording of this talk along with others like it at highspeedrail.us/events. You can find that at our website. We have, Brian, you already kind of addressed one of the questions that came in about the mountains and tunneling. We have we have many other questions about geography. Let me give you a couple of them. Here's one from Thomas Dorsey. Does the San Francisco segment environmental clearance include the downtown extension tunnel?
That's a good question. Yeah, so for those that are familiar or not familiar with San Francisco, the current commuter train called Caltrain currently terminates at 4th and King Street, which is, I believe, about a mile south of the real downtown core of San Francisco, where a Transbay terminal has been built. And if you have a time after this, you might want to Google that. Salesforce Transbay Terminal is really spectacular. It's a structure that's been completed. It's now serving buses from around the Bay Area. They arrive at Transbay Terminal, which is the length of about 5 city blocks and has a beautiful park on the rooftop. But that was built with Caltrain and high-speed rail in mind. In fact, it received about $400 million of federal high-speed money in 2009, so that that facility could be built with a large basement to accommodate high-speed rail trains and Caltrain trains. So that extension from 4th and King to the Transbay Terminal is being cleared by an entity called the Transbay Joint Powers Authority, and high-speed rail is a board member of the Transbay JPA, but that will be separately cleared, and so that has not been part of our environmental clearance process.
Okay. And here's another from Paul Texan. For the Bakersfield to Palmdale segment, has station planning started, and how different will the station be given that it will connect two systems, the California high-speed rail system and Brightline West?
Right. Well, that's a great question. I'm glad we got mention of Brightline in here. That's, we do have some memorandums of understanding with Brightline indicating that we do want to coordinate, not only on the stations, but also, where we can integrate on systems to make sure our trains and track and systems are all compatible. Ideally, we want the capacity to run our trains on their system, and they want capacity or technical ability to run their trains on our system. So there's good coordination going on there. State of California also with Brightline is really on our state DOT side a significant partner because Brightline wants to build in the highway median that's owned by our state DOT, Highway 15, I believe. And so, we cheer their success, and The station in Palmdale is definitely planned to be a good unified station for not only the Bright Line trains coming in, the high-speed rail trains coming in, but also Metrolink commuter service also is in Palmdale. So that's a great opportunity. And just to show you the transformative nature of high-speed rail for travel, that Metrolink train service between LA and Palmdale now takes about 2 hours. And high-speed rail with the tunnels would take about 30 minutes. So, that really is a game changer for Southern California interregional travel there to get that segment built. And of course, with Brightline, that Palmdale to Las Vegas stretch is also expected to have very robust ridership due to the tourism flows between Southern California and Las Vegas and the other direction as well. So that'll certainly, I think both systems certainly see good synergies of having both systems going. One really helps the other. There's no there's no cost or trade-off there. It's really having both is how you maximize your ridership across the two systems.
Okay, thank you. And obviously a lot of work is going on. It was great to see the video that you showed showing how much of that is underway. So maybe you're learning more all the time, but we have a couple of variations on the question of what have been the lessons learned so far, and what do you believe are the best actions the authority can take to ensure faster progress and support going forward?
Sure. Well, I think one of the things I'd mention is being the first of true high-speed rail in North America. We've had to figure some of these issues out as we go. And one example is the work with the freight railroads and the Federal Railroad Administration on some of the safety issues. So the establishment of the agreements around where we're operating adjacent to a freight line for safety reasons. We're building these some type of intrusion barriers where we're close, and they take various forms. But again, the fear is you wouldn't want a freight railroad derailment to ever get in front of a high-speed rail train. So these intrusion protection barriers are the solution to that. So that's something I bring up in terms of a lessons learned, just because those standards did not exist prior to our project going forward. So some of our lessons have been the establishment of policies and procedures and regulatory approaches that we work with our partners on. The other thing to mention is, for high-speed rail, as I see, Rick had mentioned Spain. I think some of the lessons we see around the world is you do want your high-speed rail system to have good connectivity with your regional and local transit systems and get to your downtown areas. But when you're, building into the downtown areas, you have a lot of existing infrastructure, a lot of utility infrastructure, et cetera. And so, these type of projects, I in my own mind see as a bit of, multiple projects. You have many times a massive utility relocation project that precedes your rail project. And so certainly that's been one of the issues that we're recognizing more fully is all the utility interactions and all the steps one takes working with the utilities and the third parties to move and relocate and these facilities in a non-impactful way for them. So one of the things we are doing differently going forward is for the current construction, once we'd finished the environmental process, which includes about 15% design, we'd gone right to a design build contract. But we've found that, that does create a lot of change orders, because at that 15% design, you don't have, you haven't advanced the utility relocation analysis very far. And some of these other regulatory and issues were really resolved within that design build contract phase of work. And what we're doing now in the other segments is we're advancing design to 30% or more. It's called the configuration level of design, so that really we're resolving many of these issues before we get to a construction contract. And we think that will help us proceed much more efficiently with future segments.
Okay, great. Thank you. And Brian, I also know that you have another meeting at the top of the hour. So if we can take a few more questions, we will. If you need to, go, of course, please let us know. Thank you. But let's keep going. Have the 2028 Olympics affected planning overall?
That's a good question. We did last year, the governor proposed a budget that included a specific call out to the 2028 Olympics. And that's something that really builds off what the Los Angeles region is doing. They have some projects with a focus on completion by the 2028 Olympics. So yeah, the LA Union Station is one example of that. I mentioned high-speed rails funding almost $500 million, excuse me, of investment in LA Union Station. And the goal down there is to have that completed in time for the 2028 Olympics. And in other areas of the state of California funding, our transportation agency, they're likewise focused where they're making investments in Southern California. They are acknowledging that Olympic date and seeing what they can get done to add some additional infrastructure by the time of the Olympics. But that's something we're focused on. Interesting point I'll just make as an aside is the LA Olympics, when they made the bid and received the nod from the Olympic Committee to host, they did cite that they already have existing facilities that are very robust in terms of athletic facilities and rail corridors. But these are not, these additional investments are things that are really icing on the cake, if you will. They're not required by the Olympic Committee or part of the Olympic bid, if you will. But there are further advancements in our transportation system that really we would do without the Olympics. But just to have that date creates a bit of a focus where, we look to see what we might be able to accelerate to have some additional Olympic benefit. And again, nothing's really for Olympics only. It's also rail and transit are also things that'll have long-term benefit beyond the Olympics.
Okay, thanks. We've had a number of people in the comments say that they're looking forward to riding this. And in addition to the passengers, we have a couple of questions about what else the trains might carry or the system might carry. Will it carry any freight? And are there plans to carry cars as well as people?
No, at this point, there's no freight plans for California high-speed rail, nor any kind of car ferrying system. But maybe to the broader issue, of connectivity, certainly some of the more modern, car share and other services that help that first mile, last mile, we certainly take into consideration and, acknowledge that a lot of planning with our local communities around station is very vital to, make sure if your destination from a high-speed rail station involves a car trip, that we'd have those facilities as well as good transit connectivity, bike and pedestrian connectivity, etc.
Okay, great. And we have some questions about funding. Here's one. Assuming the $4 billion in bond funds are released by the state legislature, which we shouldn't take for granted, everyone who cares about this needs to push for that. But assuming that would happen, how do you expect it to be split or used, that extra tranche of money?
Sure. Well, we high-speed rail is kind of unique here in California with our funding sources. The bond funds, of course, are a one-time fixed amount funding source, and then we have this carbon allowance program, cap and trade. So the uses of those different pots of money are somewhat governed by consideration of the statutory provisions around, what they're eligible for and how they're used. So what we've proposed with the about 4.2 billion of remaining bond funds is to use those funds for our Central Valley construction work and focus those funds there. That really also has the benefit of allowing our more flexible cap and trade funds, the carbon credit allowance funds, to match perhaps new federal grants, to be more flexible for early investments around the state, et cetera. And of course, the other thing with those is the allowance carbon funds come in over time with quarterly auctions, whereas the bond funds are available now when we sell bonds upon appropriation. So again, there's sort of a balance of what we use for what purpose. But to answer the question, yeah, we anticipate the bond funds going for the Central Valley construction. And again, that does free up our cap and trade funds going forward for some of the additional work beyond our current construction segment, including the Merced extension, the Bakersfield extension, train sets, et cetera.
Okay. Are there any upcoming systems engineering contracts that will be advertised?
Well, we are right now in the middle of a large volume of procurements. Let me just maybe walk through those. So we're doing, we have what we typically call a rail delivery partner. I think now it's project delivery contractor. And so that's a sort of an umbrella contract we have where we receive engineering management support through that contract, and that's in active procurement now. We also have 2 contracts out for design extensions, or designing the extensions to Merced and Bakersfield. Ultimately, once we advance design a bit, we will be going out for construction contracts for the actual extension work, Merced and Bakersfield. Those are, I would think, probably a couple years out still. So we are certainly now in the heat of many procurements, and I guess I'm not sure what particular type of engineering work question was focused on, but again, our full construction management contracts for the extensions are yet a couple years out.
Okay. Do you have time for one more?
Sure.
Okay. This comes from Emmanuel. Over the span of the rest of this project, how do we keep the larger population on board?
Well, certainly I think communications is key. We, showed you the 3-minute video. I think that's very important for us because folks that do travel up and down Highway 99 in the state of California will see some significant work going on, but there's other work that you have to get a little bit off the beaten path of Highway 99 to see. It sounds like, Rick, maybe some others have done that drive on Highway 43 and other places. So, if you know where to look, you can drive this 119-mile corridor and see significant work all along that segment. But because it's a little hard to see unless you make a special effort to look for it, we do put out a lot of videos. We do construction updates. We go to events, set up booths at events. So, I think all these things are important just to allow people the visibility to see, this project is still going and it's accelerating all the time in terms of, construction sites and so forth. And also maybe connecting the dots for people. I mentioned the Caltrain electrification project. So people in the Bay Area probably see that work going on, but many don't realize it's part of the high-speed rail system. So I think some of the communication is key to really make people understand that high-speed rail is a investment that takes some time to complete for passenger service, but in California, it's very much under construction, and beneficial elements are getting done today. One of the videos showed cars using one of the new grade separations. So there are beneficial infrastructure benefits right now that people are using right now, and Caltrain electrification should be open in 2024. So again, it's not some decade out thing. Benefits are starting to be seen today, and certainly we look forward to that high-speed rail running in the Central Valley at about 220 miles per hour by the end of the decade. But in the meantime, their work is being done and again completed, not just worked on, but the benefits are being seen in the local communities in advance of the passenger rail service. But we certainly look forward to that day where that's running as well.
Okay. Thank you, Brian. We'll have to make that the last question, and I wish we could get to more. In case any of you missed it, thanks to Alice Rodriguez from the authority. She put some links that may have answers to some of the questions that people have raised. Those links are in the chat, and of course, we have information at our website, highspeedrail.us. And I will turn things over to Rick to wrap things up. Rick, I think you're muted.
Thank you very much for coming, Brian. We really appreciate this, and we look forward to further progress. And
I want to appreciate your organization and the support of the project here. And yeah, I'll run off to my other meeting, but thank you very much.
Yep, thank you. Talk to you soon.